The time is now 12 o'clock, and I will call to order the meeting, the special Board of Trustees meeting for March 3rd. I have been informed that we have no public comment today. So the second item on the agenda is item 2, discussion and possible approval of a 2020-2021 application for missed school days waiver due to inclement weather, and the presenter is Dr. Ramsey.
Thank you. And I have the pleasure of punting since the weather happened before I arrived, and so you're going to hear from our CFO this afternoon as he's been working on the waiver process.
About the waivers anyway, because they're tied to dollars.
Yes, it is. Well, and I'm one of the few that has access to waivers in TEA, so that's one of the reasons that I do most of the waivers. Good afternoon, Board President Murray, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Ramsey. We are requesting that we apply for missed school day waiver through the TEA waiver section of for that. Sorry about that. But anyway, what we're doing is looking at half day for Friday, and then for February 12th, February 16th through the 19th, full day waiver for those days. So actually almost 5 days worth of waivers for that. And most school districts across the state of Texas are all applying for this. The commissioner has made it not as easy as when we applied for the COVID waiver, but has released some of the things that we need to do for this. And part of the documentation that we'll be sending in for the waiver is the governor's proclamation, the news article, and then a letter from Atmos Energy that thanked us for and told us that we needed to be closed during this time so they could supply more electricity to homes and businesses that needed it. So it was just one of those things that you can't predict the weather, especially here in Texas. But I think this is something that we need to do.
May I have a motion?
Missed day school waiver.
Yeah, no waiver.
I'll second. Second by Mr. Booker.
I have a question before we vote. Anyway.
Sure.
Is it correct, Mr. Dons, that what I heard you say is that we missed 4.5 days, 4.5 instructional days due to the winter storm?
Yes.
Right? And
Monday was a professional development day. That's why we're not claiming money. It's Monday. It's not an instructional day.
And are we counting the waiver seeks 4.5 days or 5 days?
4.5.
Okay. Because those are 4.5 instructional days that we missed.
Yes.
Due to the winter storm.
Yeah. Now Friday will actually be considered a full day because even though we were only going to be going half day, it's still considered a full day because that was what was on our instructional calendar for that day. That was the complete day for that day.
Just to be clear, so that we're all on the same page, this is just to waive that students don't have to make up those days. It's not necessarily for teachers. That will be a separate decision
Yes.
at a later date.
Yes.
Okay.
So we missed out on 4.5 instructional days. And as I understand, as I look at the calendar, and if I focus just on the days before end of semester testing, it looks like there are 2.5 days that are available for us to make up those 4.5 days lost instructional days. Those 2.5 days being March 15th.
How's it Saturday?
It's a Monday after spring break. And the half day being April 1st and the full day being April 2nd. In fact, April 2nd is on our calendar as being a bad weather makeup day if needed.
Correct.
And as I understand, is it correct to say that subsumed within this recommendation is that we seek a 4.5-day waiver and not seek to avail ourselves of any of those 2.5 days to make up for the 4.5 days of lost instruction, including not availing ourselves of the bad weather makeup day on April 2nd that was in the calendar for the purpose of making up lost instructional days due to bad weather. Is that right?
There's nothing that says that you can't make a change to your calendar. But this quick, especially for March 15th, which I'm sure a lot of people have plans for that day. And then also for April and 1st and 2nd. A local board or local administration can always make changes to their calendar.
The April 2nd would not be a change.
Actually,
To the calendar, would it?
for clarity,
Yeah.
when you look at April 2nd, it's a student holiday
Slash
staff
Makeup day.
makeup day. There were enough minutes built into this instructional calendar that it was thought students would not need to make up that day because of the excess minutes included in the calendar.
But but as we sit here today, because of the loss of 4.5 instructional days and their accompanying minutes, then that April 2nd day was put in there in the event you had that type of bad weather event in the course of your calendar, correct?
It would, my interpretation, it would have required the board change because it was specifically for staff bad weather.
I'm
For
not-
students.
I'm not understanding.
Because there
You're
were,
saying that this April 2nd was only for staff if needed and never for students?
so it absolutely could be utilized, but there were almost in excess of 2,000 minutes. I don't have the exact number in front of me. And so absent of a significant weather event such as the one we just had, typically you would only need that for staff to make up their contractual days.
I'm not
They're not
understanding,
minutes.
because this wasn't I don't understand why you're referring to the typical event. We had 4.5 lost instructional days and their accompanying minutes. So it wasn't April 2nd designed to be, you've lost that many instructional days and the accompanying minutes. April 2nd was designed to be a makeup day for students.
For staff.
No, for students, right?
So it says it's student holiday / staff bad weather day makeup if needed. So the way, and I was not part of the calendar development initially, but the way this calendar was designed, it included enough minutes that absent a significant weather event, which we just had, yes, that bad weather days would not need to be made up by students because of the excess minutes in the calendar. So essentially, there are excess minutes remaining. They do not cover 4.5 days. We only would be able to cover the half day, the Friday half day. I believe there's 650 minutes remaining. And so certainly, any available days, such as that day, could be utilized for makeup should the board take action to do so.
If you're telling me that this calendar with the brown marked out for April 2nd said student holiday / staff bad weather day, makeup day if needed, was not intended to convey the notion that if we needed it because of loss of instructional days or minutes, that students would have to attend that day, that would be news to me.
Your interpretation is that the current calendar year we're in, there were enough minutes programmed in for the students that there was no bad weather makeup day for students programmed because there was an excess. If something happened, we had some house money to work with.
Correct. For example, the bad weather event that happened in October and we missed 2 days. So students never would have had to make up those days because of the minutes built in. So typically school calendars are not designed for significant weather events such as we just had, which is why the waiver options are in place. And certainly then Local boards have the authority to make other decisions should they need to.
But the date that Mr. Davis is specifically talking about that indicates bad weather makeup day was there for staff, because contractually, if they missed the day for weather, they would have to make that up. Although
Correct.
taking that up at a separate time, staff discussion specifically.
Correct.
Well, the April 2nd date has already been taken because of the October dates.
No.
Teachers.
No,
Yes, for
for
staff.
teachers, but
For
not for
staff,
students.
yeah.
For teachers, yes, but that's what the school, they've already had, that's what they're planning, they're having to work that out. They wouldn't have to had we not had
The
October.
October, correct.
Well, and it seems that to me that if we're gonna put what's in the best interest of our students first, that we should, at a minimum, require the students to attend on April 2nd, because we gave the world notice that was gonna be our bad weather makeup day. And we've had a winter event that was such that we lost the requisite number of minutes that warrant us coming back on that scheduled bad weather day. And I would also suggest that if our students, best interest of our students is put first, that we should also, because the teachers are already going to be here working on March 15th and the remaining half day on April 1st and all of April 2nd, that we should ask the students to come back and receive 2.5 instructional days on those days to make up for the 4.5 instructional days that we lost due to the storm, and also to try and make up somewhat for the pandemic plague challenges that we've had as a result of COVID.
But staff were, I'm not disagreeing with Mr. Davis, I'm just asking for clarity. The staff's recommendation is you don't do the 15th because it's the Monday after spring break and worry, people already have plans and students and teachers they just won't come. That,
Right, that low attendance is the issue.
The teachers will, I mean, unless they take the day, with local leave or whatever, but also,
they can take a personal day.
Yeah.
say.
yes. And we would not, even if we came back, we had 50% of our students here because it doesn't follow a health concern, weather, what did I say earlier?
Have we used
or-
our low attendance days already?
Safety.
Safety, because we're just making a calendar change. We couldn't apply for a low attendance waiver. We would just have to accept that
How
waiver.
many low attendance days do you get a year?
You don't get any low
You don't get
attendance.
You have to
No,
apply for the waiver.
There's a waiver, but we did not.
we would not qualify because it doesn't fall under those three
The
criteria.
important thing to consider about the 15th, and Dr. Goodnow may have to speak to this, is whether or not contractually we have committed to bring presenters in for professional development for teachers, because that is a professional development day, and principals may have planned very specific things for Monday the 15th.
I guess one of the questions, I guess, is that I would have is to try to understand. Now, you talked about the, I guess that half day as being a teacher work day, and then the students being off. So it's / student holiday, or is that the second?
So the first, the teachers or the students are there for a little bit more. It's an early release day, and then teacher planning in the afternoon on Thursday, April 1st.
Okay, so then the second is a / teacher work day / students are out. So that's two different aspects then versus just in one and/or a makeup day for students. Is that a fair assessment?
Sure.
So otherwise, the students were going to be known to be out or off anyway prior to us even having the bad weather days
Yes,
that we
those
had.
days were already built into the calendar. Yes, sir.
Okay, so my take on it will be, and I understand the importance of our students having to be in the classroom, but I do understand as well as the time that the state is allowing us to have for a waiver, that those days can be waived if we're not going to have a full student attendance and/or a possibility of our teachers taking a personal day or a vacation day or whatever they may have, and not having all those people to have a full house as far as teaching and learning. Does that sound?
Yes.
Well, it sounds like to me that the ship has sailed on the 15th. I mean, we're too far down the road and we're about to break for spring break in 2 days.
Well, for all the parents that we heard from that said, I want my children in school, I want them in school as often as possible. I think those people should welcome the 2.5 days of additional instruction. For those that were inundated us with childcare concerns, I think they would want the 2.5 days of instruction. And those that want our district to improve academically should want those 2.5 days of instruction to me. So I'm not terribly concerned that we're going to get complaints about additional instruction being offered to our students in an effort to provide a better education to our students. And for the life of me, while I can appreciate some of the problems with the 15th, even though all the things I said apply to that, I, for the life of me, don't understand why we're not bringing the students back on our bad weather day. And why we're seeking a waiver for that, and they'll lose out on instruction that day. I mean, for those that say, well, not everybody may come, well, they should come because they were given notice of the bad weather day. They say, well, you're not going to have full attendance. Well, for those that do attend, they're going to get instructional benefit that day. For those that don't attend, that's right, they're not. But like the story of the boy throwing the starfish back in the ocean when the tide was going out, and he asked, what are you doing? You're not making a difference. He threw one back in. He said, I'm making a difference for that one. We ought to make a difference for those that are willing to show up and get additional instruction on the days that we put in the calendar specifically for that, if not these other 2 1.5 day opportunities.
May I ask Scott? May I ask Scott?
Yes.
This is actually quite a legitimate question coming back to Texas, because April 2nd is Good Friday. What is I don't remember. Is there an exemption, approved absence for Good Friday here? There is in California.
And while I can understand wanting more instructional days, I will say that I think, it's a different story when I realize that it was your understanding that children would be able to make up on the Friday the 2nd, but
I think that's everyone's understanding. If any board member has a different understanding of that, I'd sure like to hear about it.
I had it explained to me. I now understand that
Well,
it
no,
was never intended to
But
be.
for those that were there when we adopted the calendar,
Right, no, I'm with you, Mr. Davis.
Does anyone have a different
Makeup day,
understanding?
Other makeup day.
I appreciate that was what you were told, but I don't think, that certainly wasn't my understanding when I voted on it.
Well, as a parent. As
Well-
a parent, when I see the calendar that says no makeup, that would have makeup day, I didn't disseminate it on the staff.
Well, we've had one of the worst years known to Midland ISD with the pandemic. The stress on the staff, the students, and the community has been overwhelming. And then yet, we have one of the most horrific storms in the history of the state of Texas. You know,
All to the academic detriment of our students.
so people recently, 2 weeks ago, were going from potentially dying in their houses, committing the atrocities of asphyxiation because they're trying to get warm. I think we should have some compassion here. And I think that what the staff is saying, you know, I understand your concerns, Rick, about our academics, but I think the community in this particular time and, you know, presence of the community, I think it's important to have compassion in the sense of, you know, we're trying to do the best thing. The governor's allowed it. I think we should take advantage of the I keep wanting to say application, but it's not application, the waiver. But, you know, it's this circumstances that are happening are extremely rare to what has happened in previous years that have been dealt with, you know. And if the winter storm was the only event that happened this year, you know, yeah, I think I'd be on your side to try to inch out every last minute of instruction. But the fact of the matter is that it's just been a problem after a problem after a problem all year with distant learning, job loss. I mean, people passing away. I think the compassion part should come into play a little bit as to how you quantify that for each person. You know, it's got to be different, obviously, but you know, that exists today. You know what I mean? It exists and it's been going on. So that's why I'm voting for the waiver, because, you know, as much as we want to get stuff done, I mean, there's just a pile of stuff that's happened during the start of the COVID a year ago. And so anyway.
I don't believe that asking students to come in on our calendar scheduled bad weather makeup day shows a lack of compassion. I appreciate the governor is willing to permit waivers and hold us harmless financially, but I don't think that the waivers is going to benefit students academically. In fact, I think by availing ourselves of the waiver and not the additional instructional days, including the very bad weather makeup day we had for students if needed due to inclement weather, it's not going to benefit students academically. Here's my question. I don't know if you've had a chance to get the answer yet, because I only gave you about 25 minutes notice before the meeting. But my question is, can you ask for the waiver for the 4.5 days that you want it? And if granted, that will hold us harmless in terms of average daily attendance problems for those parents who opt not to bring their students or the students opt not to attend. But even if you ask for the waiver, can you still ask students to come back on one or more of these 2.5 days that we have available to provide them additional instruction? In other words, can you say, okay, we have a waiver for purposes of our average daily attendance. So when we turn in our numbers, we don't include those 2.5 days numbers as part of our average daily attendance with the TEA's permission. But nevertheless, for the benefit of our students, we're going to ask them to come in one or more of these 2.5 days.
The calendar is a locally decided on, is the decision decided on locally. So we can get the waiver, and if the calendar is changed, you can still do that. Now, so I mean, the waiver here is not affecting later on. It's only affecting the days we're asking for those waivers. The waiver, the change of calendar to me is another vote on changing those days. But I do think anytime the administration and board can work together and make changes to the calendar, you know, that's not really governed by what TEA does.
Mr. Dodds,
Yeah.
to clarify, if we have students make up the day, so let's say just hypothetically, instead of 4.5 day waiver, we would then ask for 3.5 day waiver. Students are actually going to come and make up the day. So then for that additional, that 1 day, it's the same ADA rules as any other day in the 100 days.
As I understand Mr. Davis's question, though, the question is, can we apply for the 4.5 days of waivers? Kids come back, we don't hit our average daily attendance. Does the waiver hold us harmless if we brought the kids back, or are we held now to a different standard because we? No,
that waiver does. If we change the
program.
calendar and that's not a student holiday that day.
We can't apply the waiver.
No, and you can't apply for the low attendance waiver because it has nothing to do with health, safety, or weather.
You certain of that answer?
I got off the phone when I was walking down here.
That's what TEA said.
Yes.
D says if you use your bad weather day, don't include that day in your waiver request.
No,
Would be appropriate.
I think for clarity, it's you're waiving the days that you're not asking students to return. So you couldn't ask them to waive days that then students aren't going to come. And it's going to now be part of their calendar.
President, I'd like to move that we, go ahead and go with a motion.
We already have a motion by Mr. Marquez and a second by Mr. Booker. All in favor of accepting the waivers for the bad weather days, please raise your right hand. That is 6-4, all against, please raise your right hand. That's Mr. Davis, 1. So the motion passes 6-1.
thank you.
The next item on the agenda is discussion of possible approval of Superintendent Dr. Angelica Ramsey's MISD entry plan. Dr. Ramsey.
Thank you. We don't have a formal presentation this afternoon because the board has had the opportunity to review the plan. I know that you received it as part of the interview process, but then after the fact, we provided that I have received some input from board members. Communications also has the draft so that they can make some final edits to make sure that if it is approved today, then we're able to publish widely and really start working on some of the elements of the plan, like the creation of advisories for students, parents, teachers, and community members, as well as a roundtable made up of the PTA council, so that we can begin those, if not at the end of March, then maybe April, and we can get those going this school year. So really, I kind of open up to see if there are any questions or comments.
You know, I appreciate the communication with the board for your plan, but you're seeking basically we don't really need to, like, if you want to develop another advisory board, you know, you really don't need our approval for that, right? But I mean, you want confirmation that from us that's what we're agreeing upon in a sense. And so, but if you want to develop some advisory board that you see need for, then you can just jump into it in a sense.
Sure, I think overall what I'm
Develop
asking
that.
for is permission, approval of the plan as a whole, knowing that any plan is kind of a living document, and then with the approval then comes the ability for us then to publish out so that we can be transparent with our community,
No, yes.
what the plans are in the first 90 to 100 days. And then also because towards the end of that period, I will be coming back to the board in a regularly scheduled board meeting and reporting out to the community everything I learned during the listening tour.
Mr. Mayor, I'd make the motion to accept Dr. Ramsey's entry plan.
We have a motion by Mr. Trischetti, a second by Mr. Bishop. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the entry plan, please raise your right hand. That is unanimous, 7-0. Thank you, Dr. Ramsey. And that concludes our agenda. So at this time, at 12:28, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Are the teacher